What's up, bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another follow along. Today we're going to look at the hip flexors and explore how we can make the most out of stretching them to improve positions like the front split and also correcting any pelvic tilt. For this one, you're not going to need any equipment other than a wall or a sofa or something to perform a couch stretch later in this video. But other than that, let's jump straight into the routine. So for stretching the hip flexors, we're going to start in a lunge position, and most people will know this as a hip flexor stretch. We can go down forward. We're moving the hip into extension. This is going to stretch the hip flexors, which are responsible for flexing the hip. However, they're also responsible for tilting the pelvis, specifically anteriorly tilting the pelvis. So imagine if our pelvis was a bowl of water, if we're going to spill water out the front, that would be anterior tilt. So what we want to think about, and this is important for every single hip flexor stretch, is that we tuck the pelvis under. So we think about spilling that water out the back of our hips. And we're going to do this by engaging the glutes and feeling a tuck. Now, before you even go into a hip flexor sort of lunge stretch, you should feel like a pre-stretch now over the front of the hip. So really understand that hip position and make sure that remains constant in all of these positions. So we are going to use the lunge position. As we go down into our lunge, think about keeping slight activation on that glute and go as far as you feel a good stretch position. Now, to make this easier, we can come further down to the floor. So hands forward, that's going to reduce this hip extension angle. The higher we come up, the more hip extension, and to be fair, some back extension is going to be involved in feeling this stretch over the hip flexor. So let's start low. Then as we go through this, we can try to sit more upright and get more of a stretch over the hip flexor. So we're going to play with some contractions here. First of all, the main one we want to think about is the act of trying to pull this knee forward. So when we try to pull that knee forward, we're going to actively engage our hip flexors. But the key to this is trying to avoid any movement whatsoever. So, and think about pulling the knee forward and pressing this foot into the ground. So I'm actively contracting here. We're going to hold for 10 seconds. So 10, 9, 8, 7, building it up, close to sort of 70-80% effort. 2, 1, I exhale. I'm going to try and feel like I can sink this hip further down. To make space for that, I can let this front leg just drop out to the side slightly. And that means I can think about pulling this hip down and forward or sitting further upright. The second contraction we can do is the closing side of the joint. So this would be the glute, the hamstring, and similar to what we talked about at the beginning, feeling the glute active, posteriorly tucking the pelvis. We can also try to engage the glute, squeeze the glute almost as hard as we can in this position, almost thinking about trying to lift the knee up from the ground. But when we do that, we don't want to lift the knee up and then lift the hip up because we're lifting out of a stretch over the hip. We're just going to think about glute first, squeezing as hard as we can, and then trying to lift the knee off the ground if we can do, whilst keeping this hip low. So again, 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then try to sink further, so that's going to involve dropping the hip down lower or trying to sit more upright so we get a good stretch over the hip. Right, it's been probably 90 seconds on that side, so we'll swap sides. We're going to repeat the exact same process. So left leg comes forward, right leg stays back. This knee can shift out to the side to make space for this hip to come forward, down into the stretch. Remember, that glute is engaged. We feel the hip tucking, so we get a nice stretch over this hip flexor, and then we can perform those contractions again. So try to pull this knee forward and through towards this front foot. 10 seconds. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And exhale. Every time you exhale, every time you perform a contraction, try to shift deeper into that stretch. Perfect. So I'm going to spend 10 seconds here. And then we've got that same effort. So this time we're going to do the glute contracting So thinking about squeezing the glute as hard as you can, and by doing so, that's going to push that hip down into the stretch further. If you can feel that strong contraction, you can also then try to lift the knee so we're sort of active in this position. And again, 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So again, try to shift deeper or sit more upright. That's going to bring more stretch over the hip flexor. Going to hold this one just for another 10 seconds. Nice deep breaths. Okay, perfect. Going to come out of that. We're going to look at the second part of this, which is not only are we stretching the hip flexors, one part of the hip flexor is also in the quad, and that is the rectus femoris. So we need that hip extension, moving the knee behind us, but we also need to close the angle of the knee. So basically flexing the leg. To do this, we want to use that sofa, that wall, wherever we have available to us. So I've got a nice little stick or a stump with a hoodie to make it comfortable. We're going to place the knee as close as we can. So obviously having the knee right below the foot, that's going to mean we can sit up and we can get to a full couch stretch. If this is too intense for you, if you can't even sit upright or your hips are really tilted, just move the knee further from the wall, further from the object, and that's going to reduce the angle here and reduce the stretch. So once we're in a comfortable couch stretch position, making sure the foot is plantar flexed, so not toes on the wall, we're going to do that same first movement again. So we need to make sure that we posteriorly tilt the pelvis. So we're going to tuck under, going to use the glute to tuck those hips under. This pretty much straight away, you're going to feel a more significant stretch over the quad and over the hip flexor. So we can focus on just holding and maintaining maybe like 40-50% effort on this glute. And then just breathing in this position. The other contraction we can do, as we mentioned, we're now stretching more of the rectus femoris, so more of the quad. We can try to actively engage it. So I can think about kicking this leg back into the object that's supporting us. Again, over 10 seconds, so 10, 9, building up in effort, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Gonna relax, and again, we're relaxing, we're shifting deeper, and we're trying to get this glute closer to the foot. Always making sure though, hips remain tucked. If you push the hips backwards, yes, you might be able to get the hips towards the foot, but we're gonna lose that stretch over the hip flexor. Perfect. Let's now come down and forward. So we come now into, this is now gonna be more biased towards the hip flexor. So we're thinking about hip extension. We can perform exactly the same stretches now in this position, or exactly the same contractions. So first one, we're going to think about pulling that knee forward. So building up tension in this position. And remember, we're not changing, we're not coming out of it by performing the contraction. We're doing the contraction in the most stretched position we can. So 10 seconds, try to pull that knee forward. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And remember, we exhale, we shift deeper. So let this knee go forward. It can go out if you need to pull this hip down onto the ground. The next contraction we have, I'm going to warn you, may elicit some cramps, and that's going to be using the hamstring, because the hamstring flexes the knee. So we talked about how if we flex the knee more, we get more stretch over the rec fem. So by flexing the hamstring, I can think about lifting this foot away from the object that's supporting it and lifting it up, and that's going to help actively improve hip extension. If you get cramp, feel free to come out of this one, shake it off, try again, or just contract less hard. So you can do like 10% effort, just try to make the foot feel light, and then gradually build up. Same as before though, we're going to hold for 10 seconds, actively lifting off. So lift, 10, 9, 8, making sure that we squeeze the glute and don't lose contraction. 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax, let the foot rest. Try to pull that hip down, or try to sit more upright into this stretch. Perfect. let's come out of that. We're going to repeat exactly that same process now on the right hand side. So get that knee as close as feels comfortable, foot plantar flexed, leg comes forward. Let's get nice and upright, making sure we think about tucking the hips under and posteriorly tilting that pelvis. From here, try to push backwards, keeping that hip angle, getting the hips closer towards the foot, feeling a good stretch over the quad, over the hip flexor. Remember, 50% effort, maintaining that hip tilt. So from here, we can do the first effort. So contracting the quad, trying to kick into the object. Remember, building it up 10%, 20%, closer to sort of 67% effort, feeling the quad working, still in this stretched position. Keep going. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax and try to shift back deeper into that stretch. Most people will feel a significant benefit in how much they can open their hips and open their hip flexors if they just do this couch stretch first. This is primarily around the quads because the hip is still pretty neutral. Do this for 60 seconds per side, then do your hip flexor stretching, your front splits, whatever it is. It's going to feel a little bit nicer. Okay, let's go down into that hip flexor stretch now. So same thing, knee can come to the side. Think about pulling this hip down. Same contraction. So first one, knee wants to come forward. So build up that effort. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Remember, exhale, shift deeper on every single one. If you come a little bit more upright, it's going to create more extension, more stretch over the hip. Second one, the crampy one. Try to lift that foot now off the object that's supporting you. Remember, if you felt cramps last time, probably going to feel it again. Start slow, start 10% effort, just trying to make it light. Just feel the hamstring contracting and gradually build up. So glute first, keep that hip angle, then try to lift the foot. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax the foot. Try to feel like you can sink the hip deeper, or try to feel like you can come more upright with the torso. I'm going to hold this last one for about 10 seconds now. Deep breaths, breathing down into the base of the stomach if you can do, breathing where you kind of feel the stretch. And that is basically a bit of hip flexor stretching. Quite an intense couple of sets that's going to help open up the hips, all of the hip flexor, including that rectus femoris, improve hip extension, whether that be for correcting anything like an anterior pelvic tilt, just helping yourself feel the hips more open after sitting a lot, or if you want to improve front split or any of those more advanced positions. This is the second single movement breakdown. We did a whole video covering the 90-90 and how to open the hips, so you can go check out that video there. Otherwise, I'd love to hear any suggestions, any requests that you have. Please leave them in the comment section down below and I'll do my best to make it happen. Other than that, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you don't want to miss out on any more future videos, and I'll catch you in the next one. Have a strong week. Peace.